Also now I'd like to welcome to the stage, I hope I get your name right, sir, is Ghias Khan, who's the president of the Engro Corporation. A round of applause, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Minister Shafqat Mahmood Saab, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Asfar, first of all, thank you very much and congratulations on organizing this event and something you do so wonderfully well every year, and it's we're very proud to be part of it. And, it only seems like yesterday when we did the Leaders Summit in 2019, I was here and, very aptly titled the Future Summit, but who would have thought what the future had in store for us. COVID will obviously have a very, very profound impact on economies and societies globally in terms of how and where we work, and we're already seeing it, right? So if you look at the number of users that have multiplied on using Zoom, if you look at the percentage, over 70%, the level with which the business travel has fallen, in terms of how we consume things, which is fairly evident from the rise in e-commerce, the rise in telemedicine, in terms of how we learn, and we're seeing this with our own kids, but just to quote an example of China, roughly about 250 million kids went online for education in just in 2 weeks. And obviously, all of this is going to have an impact on the overall global GDP growth, which is expected to be somewhere between -5% to 6%. Specifically for Pakistan, and we've seen some of these global trends also play out, but I think what COVID has done in Pakistan over the last 9 odd months, apart from the direct impact of the pandemic itself, I think it has further exposed some of the fault lines that have existed in our economy for the last few decades. Clearly, if we look at our health services, our safety net, now I must give credit to the government that they've done a very good job in handling, mashallah, the way they have responded, the way the federal government is now also working with the provinces. It's done a good job, but it doesn't change the fact that we're ranked about 105th out of 195 by Johns Hopkins when it comes to the Global Health Security Index, which essentially measures our ability to fight pandemics, to identify diseases, and to counter them. We are, of course, at a time when we were recovering. We were in the middle of an IMF program. The forecast for our deficit was somewhere over 6%, but because of this pandemic, a lot of experts say that it's going to be somewhere between 8 to 9%. So clearly, that's a huge challenge. In terms of connectivity and power infrastructure, Pakistan is perhaps one of the very few countries outside Africa where more than 75% of the people do not have access to broadband. And I'm sure my friends Irfan and Amir, who are the experts, will talk more in detail about what is stopping that from happening. Similarly, in terms of the power infrastructure, the T&D losses that we have, which are close to around 28%, a lot more than what is allowed. And the fact that 60 million of our people are still without electricity. What has been exposed is our significant reliance on imports. Now, whether it's oil-based imports, whether it's even foods, 13% of our import bill is food, and one would wonder why that happens in an agri-economy. Whether it's machinery, whether it's chemicals, but we're heavily reliant on imports for our growth. And then, of course, on remittances. And with the slowdown coming in the Middle East, one can't help but wonder that whether the level of remittances will stay at the level that they were a year ago. Urban infrastructure, and I think all of us in Karachi know fairly well what we went through in the last rains. So these are obviously some of the clear deficiencies in our economy which have just become a little more magnified and exposed because of COVID. So COVID impacts aside, I think it's given us this opportunity to relook at some of the core challenges that we face. And the question really then becomes that what can we do as a country? What can the government do? What can the private sector do? And in that, I would say that for government, taking that first, I think the government will soon have to realize that it should continue or do more of some things and really make an effort to do less of a lot of things. And one of those things is of course, running of the state-owned enterprises and accelerating the privatization program and perhaps deregulating some sectors on war footing. One of them is, of course, power, and Khalid Bhai is there. He will, I'm sure, speak about it sometime tomorrow, and Tabish Gohar is also there. But just to briefly touch upon the challenges we have, the circular debt is about 40% of the stock of the circular debt is about 40% of our tax collection every year. We are heavily reliant, a country which is which has always had the challenge of the current account deficit. We're heavily reliant on imported fuels. The cost of electricity is high. We have excess capacity, and because of low GDP growth, that problem is going to become worse. And the answer is fairly simple. The good thing is that the government is actively working on it, which is to deregulate the sector, whether it's generation, allowing a multi-buyer model, whether it's privatization of discos. These are tough measures, but they have to be taken. A similar example is that of fertilizers. That's another sector which is waiting to get deregulated. And Engro is built on this sector. All the businesses that we've gone into over the last 20 years have been funded by this sector. But I think time has come where the government needs to look at it again. Because just to share a few numbers to give you perspective, if Pakistan was to import a bag of urea, it will cost us somewhere around 27 to 2800, and it's being sold at around 1600. If we were to take away the gas subsidy that is given to fertilizer companies, it will come close to 2000, which basically shows that here is a business which can compete globally. But time has come for the government to perhaps think about that what does the world look like if this sector was to get deregulated. The government will then, of course, have the option of using the savings coming from not giving subsidized gas, giving that money directly to farmers. And there will be that option to give that direct subsidy to the deserving farmers. Because 90% of our farmers right now, which have about 45% of the land holdings, have less than 12.5 acres and are perhaps the more deserving of such subsidies. But unfortunately, the system we use right now to provide subsidies to farmers is a lot more regressive. It's passed down through fertilizer companies. I spent too much time on it, but the big message here is deregulation in order to bring about the necessary efficiencies in our economy. We need to focus on manufacturing. And this is again something that I must give credit to the Ministry of Industries and Commerce. They're entertaining now thoughts of coming up with a more comprehensive petrochemical policy. Pakistan is an importer of about $3 billion of downstream petrochemical products. We are perhaps the only country amongst the top 30 which does not have an established petrochemical sector, which does not have a cracker. It's not because we don't have availability of feedstock. We've got multiple examples of countries, even India, South Korea, which have become huge exporters despite not having any feedstock. I think a very good example is that of the fertilizer industry. The government came up with a fertilizer policy in 2001. Companies like Engro, like Fatma, they put up world-scale plants, and today they are globally competitive. in a similar way, with some help, with some support, defined support, which is reasonable, the petrochemical sector, Pakistan can become reliant in it and eventually get into a position where we can compete globally and even export. Public safety, well, of course, that's squarely with the government, but unfortunately, we're not investing or in spending as much money as we can in this sector, and that's also because of our fiscal issues. A tax collection of 12% to GDP is just not going to cut it. And it's very, very important then for the government to increase this tax base by broadening it. And last but not the least, the government, of course, will have to play its part in promoting exports. That has been the fundamental issue that our country's economy has faced over the last many decades. Even if we go back 7-8 years, our exports were around 23 to 25 odd $billion. And even if you look in the last couple of years, they've remained around the same level. Hopefully in the next year or so, we'll touch 30. But this import growth model is not going to work. We have to focus on import substitution. We have to focus more on exports. And exploring new areas of exports, whether it's agri, whether it's mineral mining, is imperative for us. Now, in all of this, we've laid out a lot of expectations that we have from the government, but what is the role of the private sector here? And I would say the number one role is for us to let go, or a lot of us to let go of the rent-seeking mindset. I think that's where we are expecting a lot of deregulation and expectations of free market from the government. I think we have to also free ourselves of this rent-seeking mindset. And we have to be now able to compete in the global markets. And in order for us to do that, I think COVID has taught us a lesson of how we can use technology to enhance productivity of our people. And that's something that all of us have experienced over here. We've had long periods of working from home, and mashallah, a lot of companies have been able to keep up their productivity levels. And that's been our experience as well. And, my message over here is that, it's keep investing in technology and focus on the productivity of people rather than the time they spend in office. So there's lots of learnings, and even though we're faced with a very difficult time ahead, but I have no doubt that with the government and private sector coming together, we will be able to address it and handle it. And Khalid bhai, I have a share from Iqbal as well, which is very, very apt for the times we're in. Tundiye baade mukhalif se na ghabraye awqab, ye to chalti hain tujhe uncha udane ke liye. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Asfar.